Okay, so this is my first video doing a walkthrough of, in this particular instance, IoT security by Palo Alto Networks. It is the enterprise walkthrough we're going to do today, and then hopefully do a healthcare one afterwards. Okay, so a lot is made of IoT or Internet of Things, and the problem has become huge now actually, and it's growing on an exponential basis based on the fact that we have lots and lots of devices that go onto our networks and all require connectivity for some reason, and often these won't have displays, they won't have any other means of management other than they go on, they require connectivity back to their home, and that's it. We just leave them then to carry on and do their own thing. And a lot of these things, home automation is something, the industrial control systems, office control systems, everything it seems these days now needs a network connection. And I mean, for good reason as well. Sometimes in some places, obviously it's easier for the manufacturer to apply patches, although they don't tend to apply patches, apply updates, and to help with troubleshooting and things like this. Should you have an issue if they have connectivity to it. However, what this also does is this leaves us open to a massive amount of security risk that is largely in the security industry. It's largely unaddressed. So, in recent times, we have had lots of publicity around ransomware and so on making its way into hospitals, manufacturing plants, energy providers, that type of thing. And a lot of these are using these unprotected Internet of Things connections in order to gain a foothold in the network. It is a sad fact that the majority of healthcare stuff, for instance, has a GUI or something like that, or has a service, has a HTTP server on it that will be running on port 80. Everything that's going to it is plain text, and that is something that, as specifically within healthcare, I think there is a lot of legacy devices that are running like that. So what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to view them. We need to be able to have full visibility into the network, what these devices are doing, what the potential, sort of categorize them, what the potential risks are, and then be able to block them at the edge or across the east-west plane in order to secure our environment. Now, I've picked the enterprise one. The healthcare one obviously carries other issues with it. I mean, for instance, if you were to find a vulnerability or something like that on a ventilator, let's say, for instance, you couldn't just cut that off because somebody may very well be attached to it, and that wouldn't end well for them. So, the only practical way to secure your IoT devices, as we said, is to understand your IoT assets. So you need to discover them. You need to know that they're there. There are lots and lots of things that will come onto your network or be put on your network, specifically within a sprawling enterprise, that you won't know anything about. Okay, then you need to assess the risk. So you need to assess what the risk associated with that particular IoT asset is, and categorize it, and then understand the risk of it being there, and then take action on those risks. So you need to apply the risk reduction policies, understand what its natural general behaviour is, be able to identify if it moves outside of that. For instance, if something is usually making a HTTP call and that's it because it's got a hard-coded IP, and that's fine, and then suddenly it starts making DNS requests, you need to know about that. You scan against the IoT devices for any known threats. So yes, the ultimate way of securing your network is to be able to react to stuff that is unknown, and that is somewhere where Palo Alto very much excels above and beyond all vendors. But you have to start with a good baseline. So let's start with preventing any known threats. Let's start with, okay, so we've got this device. It is known to be susceptible to this. Let's prevent that. Let's work out how we can remedy that and leave it on the network, or let's quarantine it and take it off the network. And then, of course, finally, we need to detect and respond to unknown threats. And that, again, is where Palo Alto comes in, because we leverage cloud infrastructure in order to provide data intelligence and threat intelligence that is frankly unrivaled. Okay, so let's start looking into the dashboard itself. So we need visibility. Basically, what's in my environment. And along the top here on the dashboard, we can see we've got 55,000 total devices, 27,339 IoT devices, 344 applications, 65 monitored subnets, a risk score of 20. And as you see, if we can hover over that, then we get the critical, high, medium, and low. So at the minute we're in the low band, so all good. 7,900 active alerts to date and 59 vulnerabilities to date. 548 total IP endpoints. So within just that top column there, you have an understanding of how many devices are on your networks, how many of them are IoTs, what applications are seen, how many subnets are monitored, your risk score so far, and active alerts to date. Okay, so security posture is basically how high your risk is. So as long as that stays around about there, then I would say there is a point at which there's an acceptable risk. The only way you can get a zero risk is to stop everything from communicating, and that stops everything from communicating. Okay, so then we break it down further. So devices, we've got office devices. So we can click into that. So here, for instance, we have cameras, video, audio conference, meeting room management, IP, phone, printer, digital AV, intercom system, all the types of things that you'd see within an office environment. And then to go back, you just go back to all devices. And we can go to network devices. Then we've got network security equipment, network storage, network equipment. And then you can click further into those to see what you have. So you've got a HPE 3-power appliance and network storage device. Okay, so that gives you your visibility and your security posture. And then, as we can see there at the end, we've got devices at risk 24. Okay. So then we look at how we can then move on and get further and quicker details. We can filter by site. So that site has the information there. We've got the applications, network segments, one subnet. We have a risk score of 56, so this one is higher. We can then revert that back to all sites. Go to all devices, so we can select which devices we want. So if we go to traditional IT, personal computer, smartphone, tablet, IT, server, generic, consumer IoT, home lighting, home automation, video streaming, video gaming, wearable. Okay. All devices, go back there. And then we can change our time value as well. So is it over 1 day, 1 week, 1 year? Okay, so we can filter along. As you can see, you can filter and you can really drill down to where something is, what site it is that you want to look at. We could even go into Prisma Access. So then you go into Prisma Access, you can see what you have in your Prisma Access environment, 3 subnets, risk score, alerts. I mean, this is the demo, so I'm not entirely sure what data is actually contained within this. But you can see how valuable it is already. Okay, so let's talk about risk scoring. So risk scoring, as I said, is there. If we want to go down to the risk overview, so here we can see the risk overview over the days. How many criticals, how many highs, mediums, lows for alerts, and then obviously the same for vulnerabilities. You have the risk score there. You can view which the risk at quick sort of glance. You can see what there is. So you have the risk score, alerts, and vulnerabilities. If we go to vulnerabilities, we can then click further into it and we can see what vulnerabilities we've got. So if we then go to, say, traditional IT again, so we've got none in there, that's good. If we go to all IoT, then we can see that we have many, including things like Xbox One and so on and so forth. And then if we move into the Xbox One, so profile Xbox One, severity high, and this one here will be the principal, I would have thought. Yep, and then so we can look in and we can see, and then potential instances, got 3 potential instances, and we can click through to where those instances are, what the IP address is, what the MAC address is, and when it was detected. And then in here we can actually change, we can't do this because this is read only, so in here you change it to investigating and you would look into, oh, it has allowed me to do it, or resolved. Okay, so going back, so there you can see how quickly you can drill into what the devices are, what the risk is, what the actual CV number is, CVE number, and then you can look to see what you can do about it. You can make a decision based on whether you want to quarantine it, whether you want to take it off the network completely, or just address the concern by changing the configuration. Okay, so then we need to talk about the inventory. So the inventory now, if we go back to all devices, this gives us, as the name would suggest, our inventory. And here's a quick view of it. So we've got the device type, the categories. So in Office, so we've got 15 categories. Again, if we go into that, we can see that the categories are the types of devices. And if we come down here, we can go into what the devices actually are. So we have 8 embedded systems, Raspberry Pi devices, risk score of 89, that's quite high. And we can look to that, and then we can see the embedded systems there, embedded systems. Give it a minute. Click into that, we can see everything to do with that, what the potential risks are. We can create a policy directly from here. If I could get to it, yep. Policy directly from here. And then we have the, if I can get to it, profile unknown, remote command execution, again, the IP address, where it's trying to connect to, 5 applications on that particular endpoint, which is that IP address there, that MAC address, subnet it's on, whether it's on DHCP, yes, and where it's connecting to. So we have internet connectivity, and this is where it's all going. And then we have on the side here, so UPnP, one of the biggest problems that we have, which is devices that can literally come onto your system and then using UPnP, universal plug and play, they can set up, when you have a router or a security device at the edge, that will automatically set up the connection and you literally know nothing about it. The only time you do it is you put it onto your network. So if this is a network cable, which a lot of things are, that can be done then without any knowledge at all, because there's no exchange of Wi-Fi keys, there's no request for a Wi-Fi connectivity. And of course with Wi-Fi connectivity as well, let's remember that guest Wi-Fi networks often have their passwords just sort of freely available, just publicly available, because it's a guest network, right? So then you have to look at the segmentation you've got. And again, this is the east-west segmentation. So this is very much zero trust we're talking about now. You have the east-west segmentation where you make sure that your guest networks cannot communicate with your internal networks. If you bridge those two, then potentially you've got an easy route in for using UPnP. You can then go straight out. That device can go straight out to the network. And before you know it, you've got a network bridge between your secured environment and your guest environment. Okay, so you can see automatically how powerful this actually is. To SOAP 8081, it's literally telling you exactly what this device is doing. Okay, and then the risk score 100, and then the current behaviours. So this describes a normal level of activity on an IoT device. Yes, I am reading straight off the help thing. So then when you move outside of that circle, as it explains at the bottom, the locations between the centre and the edge of the circle represent behaviour scores between 0 and 1.0. So anything that stays within this circle is regarded as being normal behaviour. Once that moves outside of the circle, that is then regarded as anomalous behaviour. So you would start to look at that and try and understand what that is doing, basically. Okay, so if we go back to the inventory, here we can see we have literally everything. So we have everything that is on the network and has been categorized. You can see all of them. You've got IT servers, web servers, fitness equipment. Everything seems to need to connect to the internet, and the problem is that manufacturers often, whilst they're very quick to get things to connect to the internet and then point out to consumers how convenient this is, of course, they miss out the part where the web server that's on it was rushed through development and the default credentials were left on it, for instance, because nobody had the chance to go back and remedy that, or people just don't remedy it. It's the origin of network equipment now is so obscured because you literally don't know where it's come from. This could come from anywhere. The software that's running on it can come from anywhere. So at any point, anybody can put any kind of compromise onto that software. And this is what is plaguing networks now and security now is this Internet of Things, where we have a lot of unregulated devices and devices set up specifically for convenience, like home automation, that go on, they kind of sit on the network, and in and of themselves, they aren't malicious in any way, shape or form. But because they're able to be compromised, as soon as you can compromise something, you can weaponize it. At that point, it becomes a malicious device, because at that point, it is now passing information and data to somebody else, or command and control data. You can then, everything in your house then becomes part of a botnet. We have the subnets underneath. So within the inventory, we have the subnets. We have a representation of the types of devices that are on those subnets. So consumer IoT then is on the 10, 12, 16 network. And then we can see how many devices are on there. So you can quickly get an idea of, on your subnets, there's a very graphical representation of what kind of devices you have in what positions on your network. The whole thing, right? The whole thing's about having the intelligence to hand and having the ability to understand your network first. So the traditional view has been to have like a best-in-class device at the edge, but you have that there, and if you go for best-in-class in everything, everybody's got a different view. So you've got one thing that's looking at logs, you have something else that's passing those logs, you have the thing that created the logs, you have probably, if you're a big enough company, you have like your own secure operations center. They will have their tools that they use to look at the logs. And before you know it, you've got 6 or 7 log sources, and then you've got to then go through and, realistically speaking, having worked in the industry for quite some time, usually this information, and not as detailed as this information is held on spreadsheets. So before you know it, you're looking at a source address. Okay, well, where is that source address? If you've been with the company for a long time, you may very well know roughly where that source address is. If it's a user, you can track down that user. But by the time you've done that, the compromise is long gone. That's literally it. An attacker will not come in, and they will not sit in one device. As soon as they have a foothold in that device, they then start moving out, because they know that they have a very small window of time. Even if that window of time is only 5-10 minutes between alert and quarantine, they've got a small amount of time in which they need to move, and they'll move to another device, and to another device, and to another device. And of course, one of the things that we've seen a lot more recently is malware and controlware that is then put onto an infected host, and then it stays completely dormant, so it does nothing, and there's no further communication from it. So thus, you stop getting the alerts. Whereas with this kind of information at hand, it's very quick to see what kind of devices are where, and go straight to them. Literally go straight to them. So, got endpoint protection, and telling you what protection is on it. So you have devices with protection 7, devices with inactive protection 435, devices without protection, 2 very separate things, 5015. What those vendors are, and whether it's active or inactive. Devices with external destinations. So 54 devices connected to destinations in Russia. I'm not going to pick on the Russians, but they do have previous. And then Canada, you can see how many devices are connecting to it, and one of these connected to malicious destinations. One of these, see, no worse than Canadians. One of these connected to malicious destinations, and 308 devices connected to destination Australia. No malicious, because the Australians are just really nice by all accounts. And then again, we can click in. So if we look into printers, we can see what printers we have, profiles for those printers, all the others, and we can see, you can see what ones you've got, and you can see where they are, and whether they've got endpoint protection, and so on and so on. Okay, so now we're going to look at risks and vulnerabilities, and how we can identify which devices have particular vulnerabilities. So we're going to go to this one. There's no confirmed vulnerabilities here, although these potential instances are potentially open to this particular vulnerability. If we go to HP printer, there we can see that we have the same information. So you've got all the CVSS scores, you've got the vulnerabilities, you've got a potential device there that's been detected, and the IP address of it. So you could then go and you could investigate that device and see if it needs software update or anything like that. You have to excuse me because this runs a little bit slow. Obviously yours would be a lot faster because it hasn't got 1,000,001 people doing demonstrations on it. Then we get the device details as we clicked into it. And we can see this is the same page we had before, but this is just a way of getting to it. However, although we can see that the confidence score, which is machine learning, so that's basically how confident the platform is that all the information it's providing you is correct. See that actually this hasn't moved outside of its normal software patterns. It hasn't moved outside of what it normally does, and so I don't know. You may want to. That's then an acceptable risk. There's no alerts for it. But if we go to policy sets, so from policy sets we can see that we have in here we've got devices with several policy sets that can be. So the profile is there for a Raspberry Pi device. Then you have the profile sets there. The Daniel policy test is active, we can see there. So that's what it's allowing. It's allowing DHCP. These are just created then using destination profiles or application. We can deactivate that policy set there, which means there's now currently no policy set on the on that device profile. We can activate that one. And then if we go back to the Raspberry Pi device profiles, we can see now that Edwin 1 is active, last set is active, and when it was last updated. And it will sync with the Palo Alto Networks NGFW, so next gen firewall. So we can see that as we activate these policy sets, they are then synced with our network security devices. So that's how this literally as easy as that. So then you create your policy and then you sync it. You can find what issues you have on your network very quickly. Your network has already been completely scanned. It's been scanned. Everything's been categorized. You've got just a full, as we said before, looking at this, you now have a full, easy to view, very graphical representation of not only what devices you have on your network, but the numbers, the profiles that are associated with it, the risk score, and where they are. That's pretty much it for this demo, this walkthrough. So hopefully we're doing another one on the medical side of things. So please like and subscribe because it really does help. My intention is to educate almost for free. But yeah, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.